This conversation is hosted in conjunction with an exhibition up at the Samford Art Gallery called More Than Human World, featuring work by Studio by the Tracks artists. Here we have gallery director Lauren Francis Evans in conversation with Katherine Duclos and Sarah Shotts. Enjoy. For anyone who's here joining Katherine and Sarah and I, the plan for this is to we're just gonna be talking. I'm not gonna do super formal introductions or anything. I've put some links in the chat and I'll repost them as folks join because I think they can't see it immediately, but some links really like your websites, Instagram, and then just the kind of the landing page with info about the exhibition that's up right now. But y'all feel free to drop things in the chat, or like the artists I didn't ask them to prepare slides or anything like that because I wanted this to be casual and not stressful for any of us. So I realized, and I've already told them this, but more than anything, I just was excited to have a conversation on this topic about the intersection of neurodivergence and creative practice. And also given okay, this is my introduction, I guess, and then we'll talk. I really, I have never spoken face to face. Well, if that's what this is, in real time with Katherine and Sarah, but I've followed their work for several years. And I think followed you guys being more public about your experiences as neurodivergent, and kind of from I remember Sarah, when you were in one of the artist parent academic groups or sort of thing that I put together, and I remember you mentioning that you had been, I don't know, were you recently diagnosed at that time, or you were just, it was
just I was diagnosed about 7 years ago, but okay. I was just getting to the point where I was like telling people.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I remember you had the Instagram, you've changed the name now, right? Or you've merged your accounts, but you had a separate Instagram.
Yeah, I tried to run a separate one and it was too much, but I put them back together.
Yeah, that's cool. But it's been cool to follow that journey, to know, I felt like an insider, that I knew this thing about you that I thought was really interesting and cool. And you had this sort of separate, sort of covert Instagram where you weren't being super public about who you were, but you were still posting things about your experience. But then to follow you become more public about this aspect of your identity and merging it with how you talk about your creative practice was really encouraging to watch, just as a follower on Instagram or whatever, a subscriber to your newsletter. And then same, Katherine, I only recently, or maybe over the past year, have noticed you making more posts about kind of your experiences. Is that talk about that?
I didn't find out, or I didn't figure it all out until both my kids were diagnosed. And so it was definitely I'd crafted a whole bunch of coping mechanisms my whole life very carefully in order to reach some form of success. And then I had kids and they were like, you can't have these coping mechanisms. And everything fell apart. And then going through the various assessment processes through them and just learning more, it was like my whole life put into the correct context for the first time. So yeah, it's been, the art predates the knowledge of the neurodivergence. And it's been interesting now that I know to look at my practice and see just how much is because of the neurodivergence.
Yeah. So, yeah. What were some things with either of y'all that you in looking back with some perspective that you can pinpoint, oh yeah, that was totally like I have those things too, where like I have like in my practice, I have real like I'll sometimes do things that are real repetitious or real detail focused. But then I'm not like, I remember all the way back to when I was an undergrad working on my first sculpture project. And I came in and my professor goes, well, someone's a type A personality. And I was like, I think about that a lot because I'm not type A. Like
I used to mask as one though.
you know, yeah, exactly. Like I'm my ADHD, you
also try to like it's like there's not just
right.
So much more diversity in that.
Yeah,
just jump
in. This is a student. I was telling Sarah earlier, Morgan, who enjoys hanging out in this space and is a you're a game design student.
Yes.
Yeah, game design
and 3D animation.
Yeah. But yeah, feel free to jump in, and same for other folks on the call. Like I have, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Also, like I get the impression that y'all were diagnosed later in life. I was diagnosed at like 8. So if you want like to question me about that perspective, like
Awesome.
I'm cool with that.
And that's something too that's been really a part of my experience is learning from students and having students talk to me and share things with me about their experience, and me realizing, oh, that's why I like you so much, or that's why we get along so well. Oh, maybe that could be something I am working with too.
Some type of question I asked, just like casually, like, hey, no pressure if you don't want to answer, but like, are you on the spectrum? Yeah. Or something, or like, are you?
Morgan asked me that this just now earlier, and I was like, yes.
Like,
yeah. So I've been really influenced by my students and being able to, and really encouraged and impressed by their openness to kind of talk about these things, which really pushes me to be like, this is important. We should talk about it more. Anyway, I was starting to ask a question, but the type A personality thing made me like think, and I think about that a lot because I'm like not type A at all. I don't think, but yeah, you mask as one in order to feel together and like show up and like not be questioned and be taken seriously. My question being like, looking back at your practice kind of before you knew that you were autistic, where can you kind of see those things?
For me, it's like I look back, there are so many red flags that I sort of can't believe that either nobody in my life noticed or just me. Like when I started my MFA, I was drawing little tiny rectangles and just repeatedly, and I was building form, like if you like with a pen, and if I drew enough of them, something would, be created. And then I was counting them. And then I would like at the end of every session, I'd write down how many rectangles I drew on the back of the drawing. And so it was like a record. And I would spend like 12 hours sitting drawing tiny rectangles without getting up or going to the bathroom or eating or anything. And I'm like, this is pretty hyper focused stuff. And I know that like I do a lot of repetitive, now I see it as regulating work. And so if things are out of control in my life, I need to do a certain amount of busy hand work, which is just like repetitive processes. And I have like loose work that is for when things are kind of when I'm regulated and things are going well. And then there's like conceptual stuff that's much more heavy thinking where I'm connecting dots and finding the pattern in something and then making work about it. But it's like, I didn't know any of that before. Like I didn't know what the drive was, like why I was doing it.
Yeah. So learning this about yourself kind of helped you have more clarity about your practice, kind of the way you work.
It also gave me license because I have ADHD too, and I can't do one thing. Like I make a whole bunch of different work. Behind me is my Lego work, which is probably what I'm currently best known for. But 2 years ago, I was best known for like motherhood themed work about like breastfeeding. And so to be able to shift like styles and aesthetics that heavily, like going from making like paintings with like other women's donated breast milk and then Lego. It's like they're like they're really different. And I almost didn't get my MFA. They almost didn't let me do thesis because the chair of the department looked at my studio and she said a different artist could have made each of these pieces. And I was like, but they didn't. I made them all. And the art world kind of teaches us that we're supposed to know what we're doing, stick with it for a long time, know what it means while you're making it, and then like have the wherewithal to like know how to put it together and show it the right way. And I just couldn't work like that. Like that's not how my brain works. Like I can't know what I'm gonna want to make 6 months from now. Like I can't. I don't understand how other artists plan that kind of thing.
Same.
Like it's baffling to me. So it's changed like a lot in my practice knowing.
I relate to that too. Just the like I've had some, and what's cool is I think so the three of us, for anyone who joined after the very beginning, or I may have not said this, but I became familiar with both Sarah and Catherine's work through sort of a network of mothers making work sort of about the maternal experience. Maybe not exclusively, but that was sort of the way that I became familiar with your work. So it's been cool to see that
Artist Mother podcast. Artist Mother.
Yeah. We have episodes. You have an episode, Catherine, don't you? Were you on one, Sarah? Artist Mother podcast? No.
Not yet.
Well, Sarah has an awesome podcast.
It's very intermittent, but
no, it's awesome. Do you want to? Well, you can say whatever you want to say related to what we were just talking about, or not. This is for part of the inspiration for this was just our divergent conversation. We're just going, we're following, so people can follow us. So
I feel like
respond to that.
I relate to so many things that you just said, Catherine, that there's like a multiverse of possible responses in front of me right now. Because I this summer just finally figured out the thing with the balance between the regulating work and the focus work, and that I have to have both. And I'm pretty sure I have ADHD as well. I haven't really like explored avenues for that very much, but I feel like an imposter to even say that without a diagnosis, because I mask so highly as organized and focused, and so it's something I'm kind of like working through myself. They go together so much, it's hard to like pick apart what's autism and what's ADHD. But all like
all the new research is about the overlap and how they might not be different.
Exactly. Yes, I've been reading that stuff as well.
Have ADHD 80%.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I've gone so far into that stuff. It's so fascinating. And so, yeah, I think for me, looking back, I kind of like, where do I go? Which pieces do I talk about? But I started undergrad as an art major, and it turned out that looking back as an autistic, I couldn't navigate the social machinations of the art degree and the art department. And so the theater department welcomed me in and was like, you're part of a team. Wow, this hyper-focus thing is awesome. You're great for stage management. And I went into that and I loved it when I was in university. But when you're a professional stage manager, you don't have time for creative practice. So like when I was in school, I was stage managing and in art class. And so I kind of went through this whole thing where I went like down into the professional theater world. And then I found out that wasn't fulfilling. And so it's only kind of since my son has been born that I've come back into the fine art practice. And I've always struggled with like the why behind making my art. I think because I was using it to either self-regulate or to understand the world around me. And so just now, like, I finally feel like I'm finding my voice. Like I finally have something to say. I've been a sponge for like the first 36 years of life. And now I'm ready. Like now that I have the context of neurodivergence, I can understand all of these experiences that I've been processing, and I have something to say about them and share with people. And so instead of just making art that wasn't necessarily to communicate, that was like to regulate myself. I'm now kind of finding like the synthesis or the alchemy between those two things of like having something to say and using these processes that I find regulating. And also like the third piece for me is like the research. Like research is a huge part of my practice, and looking back, like all of the projects that I was most passionate about there was a seed in like the special interest thing where I like hyper focused on a topic and I like went really far deep into it. And so knowing that, I can move forward with that in mind instead of it happening accidentally and wondering why does something work one time and another time it like kind of falls flat.
I relate to that a lot. I wanted to also invite, since we're a small group here on the Zoom call, if anyone who's on here has questions or wants to chime in, feel free to say anything or drop a question or comment in the chat. Because I love, seeing where things flow.
I think I was gonna just respond to Sarah, the idea that like what you're making, like the meaning part. When I was in art school and getting my MFA, I did not have my BFA. I went to Pratt with no art experience other than like years of taking pictures with my camera. And
you got into an MFA program. You had
well, this is again neurodivergent. Like in hindsight, I did not apply to go to Pratt. I made an appointment to talk to the art education department chair. And I brought like a few of my photographs from when I was living in China, which is where I was before I got my MFA. And I just talked to her for like an hour, and I had been teaching, and it's like, I think I'll be a good art teacher. I just don't really know anything about art. Like, I think I'll be good at this, trust me. And she was like, can't quite just trust you. Like, you're gonna have to like, do some things. And so I had to do a foundation year. And so I was like, freshman year at 27, I dyed my hair purple to fit in. And then I did a year of that, and then a semester of the art education program before I said, I think I want to get my MFA instead. And so then I walked into the MFA chair office and I was like, I'd like to get my MFA. And she was like, didn't you just do foundation year last year? And I was like, yeah, I don't want to get my MFA. And I had the art chair with me. She was a great advocate, and she kind of talked the MFA chair into letting me into the program provisionally, so that they said that I could take a painting class in the program. And if the professor recommended me, then she would let me in. And she said this thinking that there was no way that any of her professors were going to recommend me. And somebody did. And so I got into the MFA program, having never applied. I never filled out an application to Pratt. I never, like, I literally just like walked in and was like, I'm going to start going here. And they were like, okay.
That's awesome.
But like,
and for folks who don't know, that's a very prestigious program and would be really competitive to get into. Like, this is really cool.
The chair did not like me. Like, she did not come to my thesis show. She almost did not let me graduate. Like, she resented my presence in the program. But I had lots of faculty support. But like, the thing that I noticed was that I did not have the background. I did not know the lingo. I did not have that inner ego driving the work. I don't make because I think what I have to say is the most important thing. That's not why I make. I make because I literally cannot not make. It's a compulsion for me. Like, I have to. If I go too long without making something, I get really, really, really irritable. And I see it as like, I go through my life and my day-to-day existence, and there are so many things about the world that I would change if I were in control of it. And it's not like, oh, I would make people nicer, I would make it this way or that. I would move that color over here, and I would move that tree so that it's next to this fence on this side, and I would cut out that little door and I would move it over here. Like, when I walk, that's what my brain is doing. It's arranging physically all of the colors. So I've been doing this since I was a kid. Like, what if I could just cut that out and put it over here? And so then I started doing it with my camera. Like, I take pictures of like little colors, and then I would get mad that I couldn't. And this is like before Photoshop, you know. I was like, why can't I like put the colors next to each other? So like the reason I make didn't match with like all my peers that I was going to school with, and so I just didn't have the same perspective, I guess, and none of it made sense to me. Like the way the art world was run didn't make sense to me. The way that people talked about each other's work, like I didn't get it. I still don't think I get it. Like there's still a lot of art that I'm like, I don't get it. I don't get why that's good. I don't like I don't know. I'm coming to it from like a different perspective, and now that perspective is slightly more validated. Like I used to really like worry that I was, you know, my reasons weren't as valid or whatever, because I sometimes make like pretty work. Like some of my work is pretty aesthetically pleasing because I have like this strong need to rearrange color in a more satisfying, pleasing way. And when you make pretty work, sometimes the art world says you can't also make serious work. Like we can't take you seriously because that's just a nice pretty picture. And it's like, well, there's also a lot behind it. And so I think like my brain processes the world by keeping my hands busy making pretty things. And it's like the meaning is different and it's changed now that I know all of that. Like it's definitely helped me figure out when to make what, I think.
Do you feel like the reception of your work has shifted since you started being more open publicly about your neurodivergence?
No, I can't really like get a read on why, like when my work is sort of going really well and when it's not. Like right now I'm currently in this like viral moment where my Lego is like I've sold almost all of my new collection, and I'm in the like, you know, like 50,000 views on like one photograph, not even a reel. So I got like 2,000 new followers in the last 2 weeks, and I'm kind of like blowing up at the moment. I think the Lego work people really respond to, and that's something that I started because it was my son's special interest. Both my kids are autistic, and he would be like doing, you know, 10-year-old sets when he was 3. And he would just say, Mama, build with me, Mama, build with me, Mama, build with me. But I can't read the Lego instructions. I can't, my brain flips the diagrams. And so like spatially, I can't orient myself, and I always build them backwards. And it's like really frustrating. And so I have a lot of trouble building the sets. And so I had to figure out a way to play with Lego and parallel play with him, because that's what he needs all the time is parallel play. And so I started doing Lego on my own, just putting colors next to each other, and I called them color constructions. And he would build his sets and I would do my color constructions. And then he started building color constructions. Then my 2-year-old got in on it, and she liked the ones that are just like flat round tiles, and she called them eyes, and she'd fill whole boards with eyes, and she'd be like, Mama, where's my eye board? Like total choking hazards, you know, like where's my choking hazard? But yeah, like that work I feel like opened up. That was the first work that I named like autism as a part of the body of work. That was the first group of work that I said like, oh yeah, this is what this is about. And I had a solo show at a coffee shop here. Somebody reached out and they're like, hey, this is crazy, but do you want to make some Lego for a show? And I was like, oh, okay. Like, yeah. And I called it Mama, do you want to build with me? And it was just like an ode to like that need to parallel play constantly. Yeah. So I think people like it. People respond to that.
Yeah. They're beautiful. They're, yeah, but so awesome. Yeah. They're complicated and, ooh, yeah. You what, Morgan wants to say something? Yeah.
In regards to the parallel play, like I wish I'd understood that as a kid, that that's what I was doing and that's what I needed. Because my sister, like, she's also neurodivergent. I don't know if she's autistic, but she's definitely somewhere in there. She would just be like, I need you to play with me. And she wanted me to be in the story, in the, like the grit of the story, like actually doing little plays. And I was just like, couldn't do it because it was so stressful trying to concoct stories, and it had to be perfect, and it had to be da, 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 da. But what I wanted to do was, I didn't have a word for it at the time. I wanted to parallel play, which was just like sitting next to her and playing and hearing her
sharing space.
Like, and like occasionally having input in each other's spaces, but like having our own places next to each other, and that being, and having that word for it now, it's just like, dude, I could have prevented so many arguments.
Yeah. I relate to that a lot too, especially I'm an only child. So I didn't deal with it until my my oldest daughter, who's now 7. It was like, I basically what she said is like, I like hated playing with my daughter, which is terrible. I like didn't know how. But whenever I found that, like, if we go outside, I can pull weeds and she can do something playful and we're like in a good place, or and I'm learning how to have some work that I can work on at home in a similar way. I wanted to ask Sarah, since we're kind of on the topic of parenting and that the influence that has had in our practice, do you have thoughts or things to add there?
So basically the way that I worked when I had a kid, it totally blew up. Like I couldn't work in the same way anymore, because I would like, I had a lot of computer focused work before I was a parent, and I would like sit in front of the computer and just the whole day I was there. And I didn't know how to deal with like the fragmentation of focus or the lack of regulation, all those things. And so I've kind of been like rebuilding my practice, my like creative process. It like shattered it apart and putting it back together. And it's so much stronger in a way, because I was really committed to the perfectionism before, and I would waste so much time trying to make something perfect, which actually made it a less strong creative product. And so finding ways to embrace the imperfection and to like work in interrupted ways. So like I have this weaving that I did. It was one of my first pieces for my artist residency in motherhood, where every time my son, who was like 1.5 maybe when I did that, interrupted me, I would tie a knot in the weaving, and then I would come back, I would see how much more I could weave, and then I would tie a knot when I had to come wipe his nose or keep him from getting hurt or whatever. And maybe he was 2. Yeah, because he was kind of moving around by himself, so it's probably more like 2. But because the interruptions then were part of the work, they didn't feel as frustrating as when I was like trying to do something and then I had to stop and come out of it and deal with him. So finding little different things like that, and making that, Linka Clayton was the artist who created the artist residency in motherhood, and the framework of that, like using the experience, the materials, and the kind of the frustrations of motherhood as the creative practice, has been like really, really useful and transformative to the way that I work. And embracing more imperfection and inconsistency, I feel like I'm finally, I guess it's taking the mask off my creativity in a way.
I love that.
I think that's, yeah. I think the mistakes, that's something that I had to also, I think I used to really want to present a certain face to the world. Like I literally would do my, like not leave the house without makeup. And now I never wear makeup. And it's interesting dropping the mask and seeing like how much I've pretended to be more together and more polished than I actually am, and hiding like the frayed ends from everybody, you know? And like I think the work, you're right, like it's too self-conscious when you're so worried about the appearance, and people can see that in the work. Like you can tell when an artist is making from a self-conscious point. And so I think my work is much stronger now that I've allowed for me to be a full realized person. And I think it's definitely, yeah, motherhood really does test you. It really makes you figure out what's necessary and what's not. And you have to edit what's not necessary. And pretending is not necessary. Like you have to like edit that out. It's just not something you have energy to like carry forward. And I think also authenticity my kids can see through bullshit. Like they both have complete ability to tell when somebody is trying to manage them. My kids both have most likely PDA autistic profiles, which is pathological demand avoidance. And so they don't like doing anything that somebody is telling them to do. It has to be from them, like a self-generated thing. And they know if I'm not being like my real self. They know if I'm using a voice that's not real. They know if I'm like trying to talk to them in like a kid-friendly way. I remember my son used to see this person like when we were getting him assessed and trying to figure out what was going on. And he would get mad and she would just go, oh, use your octopus fingers, like find your octopus fingers to calm down. And my kid was like, no, like that is so dumb. My hands aren't octopuses, like they're fingers. Like I'm not going to do that. He just wouldn't, like he didn't have time for anybody trying to be false. He just can't deal with it. And that's really helped. It's helped me like realize that I can be who I am. And it's okay if that means that sometimes I live negatively in somebody else's head. Like if I'm not perfect, it's okay. So I really responded to that, Sarah.
Yeah, that's so refreshing. I want that on a t-shirt, like pretending is not necessary. Like, yeah, that, I don't know if y'all have, I'm thinking, well, as you were talking, Catherine, I'm thinking of the work when you're talking about unmasking and the like frayed edges. I'm thinking of the photos of yourself with your hair and being like just letting it go. And I think maybe that's some of the first work that I noticed, at least you talking about kind of the relationship to your neurodivergence and
yeah, that was when I shifted from parent work to personal work. I had been making work about being a parent, and I had been making a lot of work about breastfeeding and all that stuff is personal, but it still wasn't about like me in a way. And the hair series, which was a photographic series where every day, I don't like showering. I don't like the sensory experience of getting wet and then having to get dry again, and like my body changing temperatures. And so showering is a demand that I avoid for the most part. And when I had longer hair, I would just wear it up all the time. And I slept with it in a bun and I wore it up all day. And then at night, I would take my hair down like once a day and like brush it or wash it, depending. And I started taking photographs of what my hair looked like when I took it down from this bun every day. And depending on how long it had been since I washed my hair, it would be like wild and crazy or like not. And it was all just about like the sensory challenges of my hair, how much I hated it, but was sort of attached to it for beauty's purposes, and attached to it for, I don't know, like my hair was, it's been a shield for me. It's been a mask. It's been like a thing that I rearrange depending on the situation. It's a signifier, hair. And so, yeah, cutting it off to this haircut. This is my childhood haircut. This is like the haircut that I had when I was a 4 or 5, 6-year-old. And it like is the most me hairstyle that I've ever had. And so that felt like a big shift. That work was really seminal for me. That was like a really important series of work. So yeah, spot on with noticing that.
Well, Sarah, are there other, I know you were talking about kind of unmasking, but are there things or examples either in your work or life that kind of have helped you in that process of unmasking?
So like I said, I was diagnosed about 7 years ago, and then I proceeded to do nothing differently because I didn't have a kid. I worked from home and I had all this bandwidth and capacity to just mask at a really high level and then come home and crash and be goo and recover. And that's why once I had a kid, that didn't work anymore. And so suddenly I was like, oh wow, I actually like I feel the limits of this now, where I kind of felt before. I kind of bought into that whole, oh, you are a whatever these words are that we use to divide high and low functioning, right? So suddenly I went from being a quote high functioning autistic to being a quote low functioning autistic, and I am the same person. in a different circumstance with different supports. And
That's
so
an important point.
it was only that, like, that kind of changed my whole conception of neurodivergence. But still, I was fighting it, like when I had a newborn and a toddler. And it's really only since my kid started having neurodivergent traits that I was like, wait a minute. If he's autistic, which he is, he was diagnosed last year, I don't want to model masking and feeling like I'm a horrible, broken person. I have to reframe this. I have to model self-advocacy. And I now see this as a positive thing, because it's not my quote character flaws. It's him as a beautiful young child. And so it's like seeing the autism in him change the way I saw the autism in myself. And exploring all of that with art and with writing, and also like my newsletter and the podcast and everything, it's really been like, there's no words for it's completely changed the way that I see myself. And looking back, seeing things that I saw as like I said before, my character flaws and like big mistakes that I made, like I was a failure because I couldn't navigate art school. No, it was not accessible to me. And thankfully the theater department was in another like multiverse. I just dropped out of school and like felt really horrible about myself. So yeah.
I think that's so powerful. I think that's really, yeah, our kids really help us see like who we need to be. And sometimes that's like a very different version of ourselves than we anticipated showing up.
Yeah.
Like they give us permission to be who we are. Yeah, I feel that. Speaking of, I'm gonna have to leave in about 5 minutes to take my son to school.
I'm keeping an eye on the clock too. So yeah, just be like, I'm out. Sorry, y'all. And I'll keep this open till 11, or if you're able to say, Sarah, or if we need to,
Sure.
That's fine. But did you want to say something, Morgan?
Yes, when you finally realize that there's no such thing as high or low functioning, and it's just like words that neurotypical people have assigned to people who are doing really well or doing really poorly, or who are masking really well, or who are masking, just have stopped masking, or just
aren't able to, or
just are doing poorly themselves. And then you realize that, oh, this is actually like as a kid, I was like high functioning. I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which actually, and it's all just autism.
Yeah.
And it's all just, you have varying levels of support and varying levels of understanding. And it's all just like an opinion. Hello, small child.
My mini me.
Hello, human.
Is that Nina?
This is Nina, yeah.
Nina.
If I get it on, I'll do it with the tool after. Mama's almost done.
Could I chime in with a question for you all? Thank you. This is super just encouraging and insightful. I'm a colleague of Lauren's. I teach in the Division of Music, and I'm the parent of a neurodivergent child. And he's incredible. And it's just sort of been eye-opening to me and the rest of our family just to be on this journey. He's 7, and hearing about each of your experiences, including the hard parts as well as the amazing aspects of your lives and your work, it's just something that I found myself, as soon as we got my son diagnosed, I kind of went through a period, honestly, of grief. And it was during the pandemic. It was like April 2020. When our pediatrician kind of put us on the path. It was not till September, because of the pandemic wait lists, that he got diagnosed fully. But there was definitely like this feeling of like, wanting to like shoehorn someone into being someone they're not. But all that to say, I'm just curious if there are things that you offer. He's extremely into artistic things, whether it's visual art, music, writing, and obviously all of us as parents, we want to protect our children and shield them from the rough spots of the world, especially in terms of how the world treats you all and others on the spectrum. I'm just wondering if you had any quick words of just wisdom or from firsthand experience about how we as parents can really support our children in their pursuits, or I wish I had a more focused question, but that's just kind of, I just offer that up.
I'll answer because then I'm gonna have to go, and then sorry, you can answer it after me maybe. I think so. I used to teach art also, and the number one thing that I see with a lot of neurodivergent kids, they do at times develop perfectionism, and it is that same kind of like need to mask. I model mistake making all the time. I will actually sit down with my son. I don't draw for him. I will never draw on his paper. I will always have my own paper next to him where I'm doing my own work, and I will make mistakes, and I will visually model what that looks like. I will say like, oh no, I didn't mean to do that. Like my drawing is ruined. Like, what am I going to do? Like I have an art problem that I need to solve. Oh, and then I will like model like, oh, well, maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do that. And what I used to teach my students is that a mistake is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to problem solve. It's an opportunity to surprise yourself. It's an opportunity to be creative. It's an opportunity to change the direction of a piece. Like you can always turn it into something else. But you have to model it. You can't just tell somebody that. They have to see a grown-up fail and see a grown-up deal with it to know how to do it. You can't tell somebody not to worry about things being perfect. You have to show them that it's okay that things are not perfect. So they have to see the whole process play out. And I think that that helps a lot with neurodivergent kids. And especially like my kid won't let me teach him anything. He has to come to everything like on his own, and he's also 7. And it has to be like a self-generated thing. And so I think that that's always helped him.
I love that.
You can stop being I totally agree with that. I think that's really great. And I think that everything you just said was absolutely, in my experience, like absolutely. And also the understanding that you will probably have to repeat it multiple times for it to sink in
every day.
And like it, especially if it's like a problem that has like multiple steps and stuff, like understanding that this is in fact something that I will have to repeat and have to model in multiple ways and multiple different angles, and misunderstandings will abound. And like something that I personally struggle with my mom is just like start trying to, when I make assumptions, those assumptions often are wrong. When I ask a lot of questions, like just to clarify things, or just to like clarify in my brain, this is what this means, this is what you do in this situation. Sometimes we get like frustrated with each other because it's like, I want to make sure that don't have to do this thing again.
Yeah.
The understanding that it's quantity over quality. Like I read about this like anecdote someone had where half the class was told they could only make 1 mug for like the whole semester, and the other told you have to make a mug every single day. The who only made 1 mug was like doing so much research and like really stressing out. It's like, I have to get it perfect, get the perfect grade. And the students who were making a mug every day, first mug sucked, but every day they got better, and they learned and made new mistakes and learned new things, and they made fabulous mugs. And as someone who like does handicrafts, like I'm making little strawberry frogs, like the first one sucked, but understanding that this is a small cheap thing that I can do, and like this is something I can make again and again and again, and each time I will improve, and each time it is valid. Okay.
And that the process is part of that.
And the process is an integral part of learning that for myself. And I think that's why a lot of my hobbies, I've gone through periods of like, oh, I don't want to do this. But crochet, I've like almost never gone through that, because it's always been like, it doesn't have to be perfect first. I've definitely gone through periods of where like I thought it had to be perfect first. I've just been like, the beauty of this craft is that you can undo it and reuse the materials.
Totally. Katherine, I know you're headed out, so we'll say goodbye. Thank you.
It was great talking.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you, Catherine.
Y'all have a wonderful day. Hello, children who I've never met.
Bye.
Joel, thank you for that question. And I think, we
Yeah,
lost
sorry.
you.
Yeah, my battery went dead right in the middle of it.
That's okay. I was gonna say in relationship to that, Morgan was just echoing, like agreeing with what Catherine was saying about modeling failure and mistakes.
Thanks for promoting the book.
Oh, yeah.
You can message me on Instagram if you like need it back a certain time or something.
Perfect.
And I'll get it back to you. But I started reading and I was like,
Good. I can't wait to hear what you think. Right. One thing that I've noticed that actually, like, I didn't realize I was modeling it to my daughter, but she has like said it back to me, and I'm like, oh, like, is just this idea of following your impulses, which I think is something like Catherine talking about, like the eclectic nature of her work is something that she does well. Like right now, I'm like collecting dead worms in my front yard and then turning them into copper in my laundry room, and it's this crazy weird thing, and I don't know exactly why I'm doing it. But my daughter, I heard her say something to someone else like, yeah, well, I'm just kind of doing like what my mom does. I don't really know what it means yet, but I'm just like gonna see where it goes. And like it was so cool to like hear her say that, like that there's something to that. And that's something I try to build in, kind of like what Morgan was saying within my own classes that I teach to college students, is trying to build in low stakes activities leading up to a larger project. So like in my sculpture class right now, we're 3 weeks in and I just introduced their first project and we're still doing low stakes things. And someone had messed up. We're making these molds of rocks to begin with. So it's like, just pick a rock, any rock. Here, we're going to do this. Like, I don't want you to think too hard about this, and you're going to learn something along the way. And one student was, I don't think she's neurodivergent, but I don't know. She was like, oh, it fell over and it like really got messed up. And I looked at it, I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. I was like, but it's okay because you learned something and that was the point. Like now you know like what to do next time. And I hate grading. Like that's something I struggle with as a professor, like having to give assignments and grade them. Yeah. Because for me, I don't think the grade is that helpful a lot of times. So I try to like structure my classes so there's I mean, for some students it is, and I know deadlines are really, like for me, I'm a very deadline driven person, because otherwise I won't get the work done a lot of times. So it's this kind of balance there. But yeah, do you have thoughts on that, Sarah, or answers to that question?
I do. I would say the number one thing that I wish parents of autistic or neurodivergent kids would do is consider to open the possibility that you yourself might be neurodivergent, because it's genetic. And I find a lot of parents, especially if you're high masking, have a really hard time with that, and putting your masking expectations onto your kids is like that's the most, like the tension that I see between people who are obviously on the spectrum and don't realize it and how they treat their kids, and ones who are like, oh yes, this is part of us, let's see how we can navigate the world. And whether you have enough neurodivergent traits to qualify for a diagnosis is less important, but finding those commonalities so you can like relate on that level. But this one's more about the creative process, and it's kind of like, I don't know if it's too down the rabbit hole, but so my son is 4 and he's just now speaking, like he's just now putting words together, and a lot of them are echoes. And so what I've learned by that is that not just him, but myself also, I am a Gestalt, most autistics are Gestalt language processors. So like neurotypical kids learn one word at a time, and then they learn to string them together into sentences. And autistic kids, whether or not they get stuck with language, learn chunks and then mix and match. And it makes so much sense. Like I was actually an early talker, but I really struggled in college to learn a foreign language because they were teaching it in a neurotypical way. And it didn't jive. It doesn't make sense. But every song I've ever learned in another language, I know it. I know what all the words mean. I know the context, because it's a Gestalt. I can learn the whole. And I think that really applies. It's not just with language. We process the world in Gestalt. We process the whole. And a lot of the way that we typically go about teaching something is not a Gestalt. It's broken down in this neurotypical pieces. And so particularly with music, we have this idea that you have to progress in a certain way. You have to learn the basics, like learning language, learning music or language follows a certain structure. The same with art to some extent, with like, you've got to learn all the basic techniques. And something like my son is just now speaking at 4, he can already read. And I don't mean he's memorized books. I mean, if you show him a word or a sentence out of context, now that I can understand what he's saying, he can read. And he's learned that as a gestalt, like he's learned this process. So last year we had to take him out of Montessori school because of his language delay. They just weren't quite educated enough to like support that. I tried to talk to them about it, didn't work. So I have him home educating at home. And I thought, we'll just carry on the Montessori materials. That's based in science. It's step by step. It breaks everything down. Last year, it made a lot of sense. Suddenly, I can realize that he's so far ahead of it. And if I was so stubborn and trying to make him do each of these steps and learning how to read, I would really turn him off of reading, because he's already absorbed phonics. He can see a word he's never known and he can sound it out, and he may or may not know what it means based on if it's a word he knows, like the context he's familiar with. But he can like sight read words at 4, like he's just turned 4. And so I'm kind of like trying to figure out what to even do with him and like figure out the just right challenge for him. So I think a lot of the time, like the structures that we're taught are based for neurotypicals, and just like throwing that out and looking at the kid in front of you and being like, okay, what would be challenging but not too frustrating for you? Okay. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And my yeah, I don't know how to end speaking, but that's it.
That's awesome. Thank you for that question, Joel. That is, yeah, it's really great.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah.
Does anyone else, we've got about 8 minutes till 11. I don't want to keep people longer, but than necessary. But does anyone else here have any questions or comments? We welcome those.
And then I just had another thought, Lauren.
Yeah.
Just like encouraging the pursuit of interests, like as you get older, certain things are not cool or not socially acceptable. And depending on your level of masking and where you are socially, like I was just talking on my podcast last week with another artist, and we had like left these pieces of ourselves behind because we didn't think they were professional. We didn't think we had time for them, but like those interests are really important to us. And so kind of like encouraging to still pursue the things that you're interested in, even when you know, your friends or society might not kind of value them.
Yeah. Do you want to, Sarah, share a little bit about the book project that you have in the works, and any other things?
The picture book.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got multiple books probably in the works.
I have 2 going right now, but I think the picture book's the one you mean. Yeah. So I'm teamed up with an autistic artist, and we are writing a picture book about sensory processing, like sensory integration, the fact that some nervous systems are more hypersensitive or hypo, like more extra sensitive or less sensitive to certain things. And so it's kind of like, after I tried to send my kid to the Montessori school and like I did a big training for them, I had some different meetings and emails, I came home and I was like, I wish I had a picture book to give them that they could read with the kids, because one of their big questions was, how do we explain that your child needs these supports and not everyone gets them? I'm like, you would not be asking this about a wheelchair or crutches, or anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But it is valid, like how do you communicate? Because they kind of felt like it felt like they wanted to make the autism secret, like it was shameful. And that's not what we're about. We're about, this is part of us. You know, I have brown hair, I'm autistic. I'm this tall, I'm autistic. You know, I'm a, you know, whatever football team you are, that's how I feel about being autistic, but I don't do sports. So that I wish I had a book that I could suggest to them that they could read to the class and kind of explain why certain different supports were needed. And I could not find one that existed. So I sat down and I kind of wrote it in one go. I'm sure I'll go back and edit it, but like the bones of it were from one sitting, hyper focused on the thing. I had the vision, I got it down. And then I was waiting for, like, I really wanted Gracie to illustrate it from the beginning, but she was not available. Like, I knew it wasn't a good time to ask. So I was like biding my time. I was trying to figure out if I could illustrate it, but that's not really my skill set. But I was like taking some drawing classes and trying to explore different options. And then Gracie last January was like, okay, I want to take on a new project every month or so. And I'm like, okay, I have one in mind. And so she jumped right on board. I love her illustration style. And so we're just going to talk about how, you know, different brains might hear things, like the brain itself is hearing things louder than some people experience, and how you might compensate for that, or might feel sensation. And that's all in the sensory integration. And it's something that even after my diagnosis, I didn't understand really well. I think a lot of professionals oversimplify as you're either sensory seeking or sensory avoidant, which is not usually the case. It's like a case by case basis, and certain senses have different sensitivities. But yeah, so we did an Indiegogo for that. We completely backed, like we funded that, all of the costs. Actually just ordered Gracie like a new camera and C-stand and like all of these supplies, because I thought she would do digital and she wants to make like physical, tangible, mixed media, really cool art. And so she needed like some new supplies to make it happen. Just ordered those this week. And yeah, really excited about kind of putting that together. And in the next like year, or the next year and a half, that should be coming to life. And we're self-publishing that. And yeah, it's called How It Feels to Me, because we want to offer like the language for someone to say, I know like you think that it's not too loud, or what, you know, too loud, too cold, too quiet, but how it feels to me is like this. And then asking for the supports that you need.
I love that. I loved hearing your podcast. Sarah has a podcast episode just like talking about through this and about the impetus for the book, and I really love that.
My thought.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm just going to throw out there, Sarah, I'm so excited to hear about that. I feel like not only could that have application in school settings, but also I'm even thinking about my son's experience in a church setting with things that it's like, again, it's all designed with neurotypical people involved. So.
Yeah. There's so many applications to that. I wanted to also plug, we're going to do next Saturday at 10 o'clock. I don't know, we'll see who shows up, but I have scheduled an all ages story time where I will have, in this space that I'm in right now, we have some children's books too. And this is one that is just so beautiful. Have you seen this one, Sarah?
I have. We have that one.
You have that one. Yeah. This is a book by an autistic author, and about kind of her experience with her son who doesn't speak but communicates with the assisted communication device. And so it's really beautiful. So I can't wait for your book. Can't wait to get it. Yeah. Oh, y'all, I'm like, I could sit here and talk for hours.
It went so fast.
But I know. I'm so glad Catherine was able to join us, even though she's in Vancouver. So it was like school drop off time for her kids. So she was jumping in for a little while. And I so appreciate you, Sarah, being able to spend some time with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I've recorded this. And so once I get it I'll try to like put it together and try to make it available.
Yeah, that sounds great.
For other folks. And yeah, thanks Alyssa for being here. And Alyssa had a few folks maybe joining with her. I saw her earlier today, so we had some more folks with us on that screen. So anything else you want to share as parting words?
I don't know.
I'll just say this, Alyssa and her team that are joining us are in the Office of Accessibility and Accommodations here on campus. So
That's
it's
cool.
really exciting to have their involvement in this conversation too, because they do a lot to support our neurodivergent students here. So thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm here. This is a space. I know you're not here. We'll find a way to get you here one day because you're not far, Sarah. You're in Arkansas.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's not that far, right?
Not as far as someplace, not as far as Vancouver.
Vancouver, right? Yeah, it would be awesome to get you here. Maybe when your book is out, we gotta
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
figure out how to get you here for like a reading or something. Or
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
all right. Well, thanks to everyone for being here.
Thanks so
And
much
yeah.
to both. Bye.
Thanks, Joel.
Bye.
Yeah.